That's CLYNK, an innovative recycling technology company located in Maine. Eric's background includes 20 years as an e-commerce and online communities technologist with specialty in customer experience. He has optimized customer experiences for brands like Everlast Boxing, Smart Wool, and TD Bank. His mission at Clink is to help the company continue to pioneer in the recycling space by providing innovative programs that deliver unmatched customer experiences. Sorry, I'm fading a little bit after 2 days of talking. So I think that we will go ahead and Susan, have you start sharing your screen and presenting, and then when Kevin pops in, he may step in and say something between you and Eric, his presentation.
Very good.
Thank you.
I will share, and I will try to get this into the right format. There we go. I think that should be right. I'm Susan Collins, and I am presenting from the Los Angeles area, Culver City, which is historically the land of the Tonga people. So the presentation today is Tipping Point, Beverage Container Wasting, Plastic Pollution, and the Failed Promise of Curbside Recycling. And I don't mean to say that all of curbside recycling is a failure, but it doesn't work for beverage containers, and I'll explain why in this presentation. So first of all, starting off, I'm going to be talking about container deposit laws today, which is, for those of you who aren't familiar with them, maybe you don't live in a deposit state. It's when you purchase a beverage container and you pay an extra 5 cents as a deposit or 10 cents as a deposit. And when you return that container for recycling, you get your deposit back. So these exist in more than 50 countries around the world. Here in the United States, we only have them in 10 states. And we've seen tremendous growth. This is one of the most popular slides we show because it's just stunning information. Plastic bottled water sales have grown 30-fold since 1996. Altogether, we produce and sell more than 260 billion, that's billion with a B, beverage containers of all types in the United States every year. So it's not a trivial situation. And we know from all of our statistics and experience over decades throughout the world that container deposits are the rock stars of recycling. That little deposit is an incredibly powerful incentive. And so the recycling rates for containers that are on deposit are 2, 3, sometimes even 4 times as much as when that same container is not on deposit. So even though we think of our recycling rates as national, it's really sort of a story of 2 different groups of states. We have very high rates of recycling for beverage containers in the deposit states and pretty low recycling rates in the non-deposit states. So it's the deposits that are really bringing up the rates. And even so, the recycling rate for beverage containers is only an average of 30% in the United States, with nearly half of all the beverage containers that are recycled coming from those 10 deposit states, even though they only have 28% of the population. And again, this is not a trivial issue. In total, about 2.3 million American homes could have all of their energy needs met with the amount of energy required to replace the beverage containers that are wasted. So when we're throwing away beverage containers, you can also think of it as you're throwing away energy, and you're throwing away something that could be reducing greenhouse gases instead. So here's some more information on how the rates have been so stagnant over time. This is the PET recycling rate versus something called the rPET generation rate. That's a new term that NAPCOR is using now. So that orange line on the bottom is the amount of material that's usable that can actually be sold and put back into a new product at the end of the day. A lot of the PET, so-called PET that's collected is actually, there's a lot of contamination. There's also just the labels and the caps that are associated with the materials, but also sometimes look-alike bottles that are in those bales. So once all that stuff is cleaned out, the orange line is representing how much really gets recycled. And for 2020, that's down to 18%. So the equivalent of more than 4 out of 5 PET bottles are not recycled again. It's only 18% that's actually usable material that gets recycled into a new product again. And just to back up for a second, when I say PET bottles, I mean the bottles that are like soda bottles and water bottles. So if we were going to just rely on curbside recycling to collect beverage containers, the best we could do, best case scenario, is 38%. That's where we would top out as a country. That's as much as we would get. Why is it so low? Well, first of all, a lot of beverage containers are consumed away from home. Curbside recycling is something that affects residential properties. But even if it was present at all residential properties, there are losses in sorting, there's losses in processing, there's losses just from the fact that we're not getting that material because there's so much that's in the commercial sector or the on-the-go sector. So once you do all that math all the way through, the best you'd ever do is 38%. That's why curbside recycling is not going to be your best idea for beverage container recycling. Now we've got something new that's been going on in the last few years. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation has been working with a bunch of corporations on the Plastics Pact, and these corporations have made commitments, goals to reach certain levels of use of recycled content. And this chart, all the red bars are how much recycled content they have put into their goals or their commitments, and the blue bars show how much they're actually doing right now. So they've got a long, long way to go to make their commitments. They can't make their commitments for recycled content if they can't get the material in the first place, if they can't get it collected. So once again, this is why we're approaching more and more inevitability of having a national container deposit law, because there's no way to get these things done without it. Also, there's no way to meet the greenhouse gas reduction goals that many of these companies have. This chart, I'm just showing one example. Beer packaging is 40% of the carbon footprint of beer. It's even higher for bottled water because the bottle is where most of the carbon footprint is. So it ranges between like 30 and 60% for beverage containers. So if you're going to reduce the carbon footprint of the products you're making, you have to address the packaging piece. And in order to do that, you've got to use recycled content. What we've seen happen over the last 10 years, and thankfully, I think we're getting around to turning a corner where we're not going to see any more repeal bills. These were all the ones I could pull out of my own files. This is 23 repeal bills that we fought back over the last 10 years. And one of them actually was successful in Delaware, the only bottle bill that's ever been repealed in the world. So the American Beverage Association is now just called American Beverage. And they've got this program going called Every Bottle Back. They're saying that they're going to be spending $10 million a year over a 10-year period for a total of $100 million in spending. But even on the day that this program was announced, Plastics News did an analysis and used American Beverage's own figures and determined that if they were successful in completely accomplishing all of their goals in this program, it would only increase the PET recycling rate by 1.3 percentage points. Basically, that's almost a rounding error, hardly worth doing. I don't know why they would want to spend $100 million and only get the PET recycling rate up 1.3 percentage points when they're trying to meet these recycled content goals that are so lofty. There's a disconnect there. Also, of this money, they spent an estimated $5.6 million earlier this year on a Super Bowl ad, which is not necessarily going to get a lot more PET collected either. So again, I question the strategy here. This is from a report by the Changing Markets Foundation that showed that there has been a very long history of failed promises going back into the early 1990s. This in particular is looking at Coca-Cola and the different goals or promises or commitments that they announced year after year after year. And yet none of these were met. Changing Markets was not able to find any example of a goal or a commitment that was made and actually met. And it's a really amazing report, very long, goes over a lot more subjects than just this one graphic. So here again is why we see the absolute inevitability of a national container deposit law. The rest of the world is seeing this. We have seen the population covered by deposit laws more than double in the last 5 years. In the first, deposit laws started in 1970, and in the first 47 years, they covered less than 300 million people. And then over the next 5 years, boom, another 400 million people live in places where a new container deposit law has been passed. And some of these haven't been implemented yet because they're so new. And we have to change this chart just about every month because more and more places are coming on board. So here's our graphic of what it looks like around the world. All of the blue is places that already had deposit laws as of 2017, and all of the yellow is all the new container deposit programs around the world. What we're seeing also in the United States that's absolutely necessary, we need to do this immediately, is that the deposit laws in the US aren't doing full coverage. Maine is terrific. They cover 91% of the beverages sold there, but Massachusetts is down in the 40s. We need to get these programs fully covered. That's going to bring the material in that is needed to create the recycled content that'll help the beverage companies meet their goals. And this is the last slide. This is showing supporters of container deposit laws. Many of these organizations, whether they're nonprofits or businesses, recyclers, or trade associations, many of these folks didn't have a policy in favor of container deposit laws even 2 years ago. More than half of the organizations on this chart have just come out with policy positions in favor of container deposit laws in the last 2 years. Again, it's the inevitability. It's like this avalanche of information coming toward us. And with that, that's my last slide. I'll stop sharing and I'll turn it back to, I think, Kevin this time.
Yeah. Hi, Susan. Thanks very much for that. Sorry, I missed the very beginning of it. But Eric Winters from Clink is up next. I'm going to turn it over to him. And then if there's time at the end, we'll take some questions. It's very exciting news that you bring, Susan. Eric, you're up.
All right. Okay, so I'm getting some help showing the slides because I
believe
one arm.
Yep,
Going to do that.
Yep, I got it. Hold on just a second.
While she's doing that, thanks, Susan. Every time you talk, I learn something. It's really awesome. And go full screen. Back one, I think. So my name's Eric Winter, and I work with a company called Clink. And Clink does bag drop recycling. We're a technology company. We pioneered bag drop recycling, which is one of the new modalities to support successful bottle redemption programs. It's an alternative to manual sorting or machine-based sorting where people feed containers into a machine. And bag drop makes recycling way easier for people. It involves setting up an account. It allows customers to bag all of their beverage containers together and drop them and go. And so this presentation is a little bit to bring bag drop alive, but it's also, I wanted to talk more in the abstract about how important it is to keep customer experience and customer focus at the center of any program. Go ahead, next slide. So our true north at Clink is that the customer's king. When people get together to talk about bottle bills, that you have a lot of industry players, you have stakeholders like beverage manufacturers and distributors, you have waste haulers, and people talk about what the program should look like and which stakeholders are going to get which money and who's paying. If you're going to have a successful program, it's important to keep at the center that beverage container recycling happens at the individual level. There's a person who's consumed the beverage and they have to make a choice about how they dispose of it. So much of our thinking is how do we make that value proposition a winning value proposition for recycling? Next slide. So here's a little view of what bag drop can look like. On the left, you see a consumer who is at a grocery store out in the parking lot. He will scan that bag. There's a little tag on that bag, and it opens the door at an unmanned depot, and the customer can drop that bag in the box and be on his way. Typically, they will go shopping. The vast majority of folks that are returning at the bag drop locations that we operate end up shopping immediately after or immediately before. And then the key part of this system is there's operations that take all of those containers and bring them to a facility and process those containers. They scan the bag again to associate the containers in that bag with that customer. It's a big plant. It's very efficient. There are big, high-speed machines that process all the material. But the customer, this is the important part, the customer sees none of that. The customer smells none of that. The customer hears none of that. It's an easy experience for them. What they see is on their app or in this store, the two pictures to the right, they see that the containers have been received and have been credited to his or her account. It's simple and it's efficient and it's easy. It saves them mountains of time and it's enjoyable. It's safe, it's clean, and these are keys to drive increased recycling. So the North Star for us is customer experience. Next slide. So let's take it into the abstract a little bit. What we focus on is making the benefits outweigh the costs. Next slide. And we want to dissect what are the benefits that you can increase. Well, when it comes to bottle bill material, you can increase the amount of money you pay per container, or you can increase the positive feelings that people get by redeeming a container. Next slide. And then we look at the costs and we break it down into all the different sorts of costs. One of the biggest one for people considering redemption is how much time and effort is there. But there's also things like discomfort and risk, safety. And we look at each one of those different elements. What I'd like to do here is, next slide, focus on time. Next slide. And there's a lot on this slide. So I'm going to slow down and take it slow. There's three different scenarios here. And the scenario on the left, the red one, is what's not uncommon in the current state of beverage container redemption. It takes about 30 minutes in total, and it involves the container collection for the consumer, for the household, in their home, bagging up the containers and packaging it to bring it someplace to redeem. And that's the same across all three of these scenarios, you'll see. The scenario on the left also has the person or the family transporting those containers. And depending on how rural or urban it is, there's a wide variety of how long that would take. What's in this one is that they're going to a dedicated redemption facility, either like a CRV take back spot that's on the other side of town, or here in Maine and New York, there's redemption centers that are often on the far side of town. But it's a dedicated spot where it's a separate trip. And then finally, they have the redemption transaction, which we have 12 minutes on. So the total time's 30 minutes. The middle scenario is one that leverages what we call common stop locations. If you can locate opportunities for redemption at places where people go already, then you can reduce significantly the amount of time that it's costing these people to do the redemption. So we take that 13 minutes, reduce it down to 1 minute, and we get down to 18 minutes. And then on the far right is what we see with bag drop, at least in Maine and New York, where it's a common stop location, and we take the transaction time down from 12 minutes to 1 minute. What we saw on that first slide is it's reliable. People know that they can drop this off. The technology is very simple. It's not out of order. The box doesn't fill. It's not like the machines, and it's not like a redemption center where you have to stand in line and wait. You get there, you drop it, and you go. So you reduce the total amount of time to 6.5 minutes. Next slide. So a key piece on this is like, how do you, obviously less time is better, but how do you sort of gauge how impactful that would be? And here's one methodology for doing that. If we take the amount of time and figure in how much money you make, we can come up with some proxy measurement. So for 100 containers at 5 cents, it's $5. If it takes 30 minutes, then you're making $10 an hour. The same 100 containers, $5, you haven't increased the deposit or you haven't increased the amount you're paying. But by making it 6.5 minutes to effect a redemption, you're effectively getting $47 an hour. And that makes a difference. There are a lot of people out there who will do something at $47 an hour that won't do it at $10 an hour. And so that drives increased recycling. So these are just the financial benefits. On both of these, you could improve sort of the ROI for the consumer by using some of the other levers, not just the money, but by increasing the positive feelings. So next slide. And that's what we are talking about on this slide, but there are all kinds of ways to increase the benefits. And one of the advantages of a bag drop system is that it is an account-based recycling system. People set up an account and they interact with digital touch points, either on the web or on the app or on kiosks that are in the stores. And it gives you an opportunity to communicate with those customers. So you can educate about the benefits and you can also celebrate the recycling behavior. When we say celebrate, there's actually a lot of tools in the toolbox for celebration. Next slide. Here's just a few examples from Clink. We have a super clinker program where we say, congratulations, you're one of our top clinkers. You can also say you are doing better this year than you did last year. Within the interface, we do environmental impact calculations that are customized for each recycler. And we do fun little things like how many lobster traps full of containers you've done, or what the carbon offset is for the amount of recycling you've done, to educate people and try to bring it alive. But that, this is sort of an attaboy, good job. And that sort of communication can really make a difference, especially if you deliver it in a way that's engaging and fun. So with an account-based system, you could do that with email, SMS, app alerts, or via the kiosk if somebody doesn't have an internet connection. And then you also have social and earned media, to talk about the impacts and raise awareness. And then finally, you have a whole slew of things for gamification. One thing we do in Maine is we have a Clink for Schools challenge. People can associate with different groups and you can set up competitions, you can set up prizes. There's a whole slew of tools you can do to make the recycling behavior more engaging and more meaningful. When people are part of a team, when they're trying to get to a goal, and when you celebrate them and communicate with them about how they're doing towards that goal, you can affect real change. I think that might be my last slide.
Okay, Eric, thanks very much, Eric. That was great. Actually, I'm going to ask you a quick question, but I'm going to tell Susan her questions. We're trying to get these two answered. One for you, Eric, is how do folks who don't have a smartphone intersect with the program? But before you answer that, I'm going to Susan. I was going to ask. There was a question about if this national bottle bill idea sweeps the country, what happens to the curbside programs? You're going to answer that after Eric tells us how a non-smartphone user uses the Clink system. Go ahead, Eric.
So with the Clink system, we have those kiosks at grocery stores. I think that the short answer is there's a variety of different ways that you could engineer to support inclusion. But what we have in Maine and New York is that the kiosks in the grocery stores allow customers to sign up, to see their balance, to print the tags that they need for their bags, do all the things that they need to do to function within the program. And then the money goes back into an online account there that allows them to cash out. It's available in that kiosk. And they cash out, they get a receipt just like they do with a reverse vending machine within a grocery store. That we work then with the grocer, the person takes the receipt, goes through checkout, again, usually shopping at the same time because they have a money equivalent in their hand and they're going through checkout, and it's the cashier that hands them the money.
I think that's the key, and is the connection between the accounts and this and your system and the supermarket, so the retailer that is hosting the kiosk. So that's a critical link and a very convenient
I think that's
one
a key piece. That's a key element of the programs when you have these common stop locations. That it really is a win-win for the grocers. They're getting to their stores and accessing money in their stores, and they have historically fought container redemption because it's not core business. But they also are saddled often with a lot of responsibility in that take back requirement. And with a bag drop system, a lot of that can go out in the parking lot and it doesn't impact the square footage within the store, but it allows them the benefits of bringing people to the store to interact with the program.
Right. No, that's great. Actually, I see that, and that's something we're working on here in California. Try out their system like yours. Susan, could you address that question? I think you built a persuasive case that there's a move coming to have more deposit laws. What happens to all the curbside programs that are currently in place? If you could talk about that for a minute.
Well, in short, they carry on. I mean, we've seen in state after state in the United States that, states that started with only covering carbonated beverages have expanded their deposit laws to include more types of beverage containers. And the other thing that's been a big impact in states getting new deposit laws is that, again, not everybody has curbside recycling. So for some percentage of the state, it's just adding a new recycling program where there wasn't anything before. But of course, the curbside programs, the material recovery facilities do carry on and do recycle, but their material has a better chance of being cleaner. Most people don't know this, but the statistics from a couple of studies on aluminum show that 1 out of every 3 aluminum cans that's put into a curbside bin ends up being sorted into the wrong pile. And a lot of that goes into paper. The aluminum cans get smashed and they're flat and they go right along with the paper. And the other studies have been done on PET containers. 1 out of every 6 PET containers ends up in the wrong pile. So one of the consequences is that all of the curbside materials, the MRFs, will be producing cleaner bales, and hopefully they'll get compensated a little better for that as well.
No, I can see how that there was, when the sword came down from China, it was all about your contamination rate, whatever that contamination was, whether it was aluminum can or a lot of sugary water in your paper, that could hurt your ability to get that material accepted in China. So it does feel like it's a win. I think the question here becomes our commitment to putting enough funding into the kind of the waste management, the resource recovery system, that it does handle the material that's in a curbside bin, and consumers are incentivized, if they so see fit, to get their containers back for the redemption. The idea would be to add, why not add ketchup bottles and shampoo to those container question in terms of getting back to a clean stream of resource recovered raw material. Is that something that is on your radar screen? Like mayonnaise jars and shampoo bottles, can they fit into a redemption system?
Well, there's something that's really important, especially with plastics, food versus non-food. And I actually put this new study that came out today, I put it in the chat from an earlier session, that plastics can have different kinds of additives, and some of them are appropriate for food grade material, and some of them are not appropriate for food grade. And so if you have something like a shampoo bottle, they can go ahead and put other additives in that shampoo bottle, but then it's not a good idea, and it's, not kosher to then mix those materials together in the recycling stream. And then suddenly you've got these additives that aren't fit for being in food grade products. and you've got them in a bottle. So you don't want that to happen.
Right,
That's why
right.
it's so important, why these deposit programs are so important, is because they capture the clean material that's only food grade. And then you can make another water bottle or soda bottle out of it, and it'll be safe.
Thanks. Actually, that's a really good point, and I clearly wasn't thinking. Let's see. I think that's we're 305 or 304, and unless there's another burning question that someone wants to throw at me, we can call it a close. Thanks again, Eric and Susan and Chris for organizing this. We'll see you at the happy hour next. I think that's next door.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chris.
My pleasure. Thank you. So nice to have you. Appreciate your time and contributions, all of you. So go raise some virtual glass or get to the fridge and get your own bottle out or something, okay? Good night.